The energy challenges in the country is ADHIL NCHABELENG. He joins us now from our Pretoria studios. Good afternoon, ADHIL, and thank you so much for your time on the SABC News Desk.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much.
ADHIL, can I just get straight into it? Is there, in your mind, a deliberate intention to bring Africa's biggest power utility to its knees and make it disoperational, or is it just a sheer negligence on the part of management? Just your thoughts on that.
I think the issue of what Eskom is currently experiencing, one is we have always maintained the view that there is a massive sheer negligence on the part of management, because the issues relating to load shedding by now should have been a historical issue. And as a result, what Eskom is actually going through is a symptomatic issue with relation to the current negligence on maintaining power stations and ensuring that there is effective generation of power. Eskom is sitting with 47,000 megawatts. Right now, at its operational level, there is only almost about 26,000 megawatts in the system, which means when Eskom tells us that there is load shedding stage 4,000 megawatts, which they are short of, which means the current demand is above that amount which currently Eskom is sitting with. So there is a huge negligence on the Eskom's management part. The aspect of really, is there an attempt to undermine or sabotage Eskom? Maybe it could be entertained because, you know, during the week we saw a massive explosion of a power station that happened in South Africa. I mean, if most viewers are aware, there was a huge explosion of a transmission station which actually went down on the distribution level. You know, and we have never seen such in South Africa, where you have a distribution station exploding in stages and ending up into a massive crisis and chaos. So there are problems within the current system we're sitting with, but the aspect of load shedding is purely generation and the way they are balancing their distribution of power at a national level grid.
All right, ADHIL, let's just take a step back for a moment, all right? We want to understand what got Eskom to this point. One gets a sense that this is a very multi-layered, multi-folded problem that comes down to challenges at power stations and also proper maintenance.
It's definitely a maintenance issue. It's definitely power stations related. You cannot have 47,000 megawatts energy availability in terms of power, but you are unable to meet a basic, say, 30,000 megawatts, where you are falling short of a huge amount of almost 20,000 megawatts out of your system. That shows that there is a massive problem on maintenance relating to Eskom's power station. So it is an Eskom power stations related challenge. Distribution, that is why they have to load shed, because they have to balance the various areas so that it does not go into a chaotic environment where major transformers as well as the distribution lines are actually affected, and as a result it damages the equipment throughout the distribution and the grid itself.
All right, you've mentioned that sheer negligence on the part of management is in large measure due to this. How did Brian Molefe and his team get it right, ADHIL?
Remember, during the phase where there was a massive load shedding, one is the experts within Eskom, the engineers, the professionals within Eskom went in and prioritized the key aspects of power generation. Power generation, you need to have your stations working, you need whatever has been mothballed, you need to bring it back into line. So they went in and actually did a thorough work of ensuring that there is prioritization of funds, there is prioritization of spending in terms of making sure that power stations are back in line, and ensuring that there is even backup power. South Africa should not be falling into a load shedding stage 4 when we already have something like 4,000 megawatts of backup power, which is hydro-based. They call it battery power, whereby they pump water up and then they bring it down through a hydro system when there is a huge demand in terms of peak demand required. And in this case, we should not be experiencing such things when we have backup power. So the experts within Eskom, the engineers, know fully well that massive power stations, in terms of 6 to 7 power stations which are not operational and are offline, and part of their units are not actually pumping the generated energy required, is one of the issues. The other aspect is the political meddling and the political interference within Eskom that keeps on ensuring that Eskom does not actually revive itself. If you have low workers' morale, You have low staff morale. People are unsure and insecure about their jobs. You're not going to get the best performance out of them and the focus, because they start asking themselves questions. What are we investing in this for? Because the next month I might be out of my job. So there's particularly issues relating to people, relating to maintenance, relating to systems. Management itself is not in control of Eskom. The executive and the board has completely failed in ensuring that Eskom becomes an operational entity and is actually generating energy that is required.
ADHIL, and you've actually preempted my next question there, because there does seem to be a kind of disconnect going on at the power utility between workers and the executive management and the board.
Absolutely. I mean, you have seen it. There's more than that. Remember, there's two departments. The Department of Energy, there is the Department of Public Enterprise that is fighting over the control of Eskom. And it seems like both ministers don't even speak to each other. Minister Pravin hardly ever consult Minister Khadebe, because when they issue out directives of what needs to be done with regards to Eskom, both are speaking as individuals, and at times they're contradicting each other. Then comes at the Eskom level, the board, as well as the executives, as well as the general workers in general. Workers are complaining, as well as management is complaining, that the executive level and the board itself has never engaged workers on a thorough basis to thresh out issues relating to Eskom and relating to their jobs, and again, the security of their jobs, the issues of retrenchment, the current unbundling in the market, the discussion of actually IPPs hurting Eskom in terms of its balance sheet. So there are myriad of issues, but particularly these issues are not actually attended to because of the petty squabbles between board management, the ministers, as well as the inability for workers to actually get the bosses to start listening in terms of their issues relating to what needs to be done. I mean, you have seen it at some point. We had a situation where there was almost 5 kilometers of trucked in coal, which was stopped at the loading zones because there is an almost deliberate attempt to stop coal being delivered into Eskom coal yards. Why? Because if you stop coal being actually delivered, the truckers will have to stand there for 24 hours. Most of them have to idle their trucks for almost the whole day, ensuring that they don't lose a line, because a truck cannot just start and stop. You have to keep it running. So there's a whole lot of problems that are going on in Eskom. But at the national level, we need to prioritize Eskom as an asset of state, and particularly for serving the public need.
ADHIL, very quickly, we are running out of time. So our power utility makes about 180 billion rand annually. Out of this, workers are paid about 44 billion, all right? So can you take us through what happens to the rest of the money? One would think that it can be set aside for maintenance and to make sure coal is available at a cheaper cost.
Look, Eskom is sitting with an old problem. One is the evergreen coal agreements and the top 5 coal actually producers that have always enjoyed a premium position within Eskom. For the last 40, 50 years, these were the same companies that have been supplying coal. So there is no coal, there's no competitive coal pricing in South Africa. And the aspect that the maintenance side of it, where you have major engineering, major component suppliers company, boilers and all of those things, and engineering equipment is always provided by the same top 5 companies that are massive multinationals, and the technology is not even available in South Africa. It has to be brought in. So there is major challenges that needs to be looked into on how Eskom can be made efficient and can spend less money on what it needs to. Renegotiations of coal prices is very critical, and bringing in a flexible approach by which you can introduce new suppliers, which is a competition environment where they can supply required coal at a cheaper price, is very critical. The empowerment of black suppliers as well as black emerging coal miners is not happening right now in Eskom. You know, you have a situation where they are shut out of the system and they are not given the opportunities required. So within Eskom, there has to be a proper process by going in and ensuring that after these elections, that the prioritization of making sure that Eskom works becomes of a highest national priority and is treated with the most urgent environment. Right now, the solutions that the president has put out, his task teams, his recommendation of the other task teams that are coming on board, the review task teams, that is not going to work. I mean, we've already seen the report, already talks about laying out 16,000 workers. Workers are not going to be happy to be actually released out of Eskom when you already have a load shedding crisis that we're faced with. So most of these problems are systematic and they are self-generated. The fundamentals is to generate energy, make sure power stations are working. If need be, build brand new power stations, particularly base load power stations. We have already seen the crisis and the disaster of IPP's program. We have over 886 IPPs that are pumping energy into the grid, but they are not even meeting Eskom's current challenge of load shedding. At night, when we need IPPs, they are not there to be providing electricity. So we have to focus back on base load, coal-based, as well as the introduction of nuclear-based energy into the grid, and ensuring that this economy is sustainable and actually powers itself going forward into the future. If we cannot meet a demand we get short of 4,000 megawatts of electricity, and we have to literally rationalize electricity throughout the country through the grid. It tells you there is a fundamental problem, which means you cannot bring back in new industries. The president's attempt of going around the world and saying we want investors, if you don't have power, you don't have electricity, there is no use. I mean, you're actually wasting your time. Get the fundamentals right. Make sure that we have electricity. The president should be making it a priority that the instructions to say the power stations that are not working should be brought back into line. Eskom should be operating at an above 80% energy availability factor at any given point in time, so that there is enough energy to go around. And then the second process is the planning of introduction of new power stations that are base load based. Base load meaning 24-hour generating power stations that gives you electricity at the cheapest cost possible. In this case, the cheapest cost means that your coal prices must come down, the introduction of new players must come in, there must be a competitive environment where we must liberalize and open up the market for new black players to come in. Then Eskom becomes a proper national asset that becomes an empowering tool in terms of the economy, power. At the same time, it helps black emerging miners of coal, as well as service providers, as well as the emerging towns that are coal-based, to survive and go into the future. The current policy trajectory is going to actually drown Eskom. You cannot be depending on the complete actually shutdown of coal-based basin cities, as well as a region like Mpumalanga, and hope that we will be able to meet our energy needs in the future. There has to be a relooking at the current policy environment.
ADHIL NCHABELENG, thank you so much for sharing your invaluable insights with us from our Pretoria studios. Let's move on now.
Thank you so much.